15,000 feet over Thanh Hoa Bridge, North Vietnam. An F-105 Thunderchief strike package rolls in on what should be an undefended industrial target, but instead, white telephone pole shapes leap from the jungle canopy below, tracking with unnatural precision, and in seconds, the American doctrine of altitude equals safety shatters alongside the first jet to fall to a Soviet SA-2 guideline missile. Operation Rolling Thunder opened with confidence bordering on certainty. U.S. Air Force and Navy planners believed North Vietnam's primitive infrastructure would crumble under sustained air pressure. The campaign's architects envisioned a gradual escalation: hit fuel depots, rail yards, and bridges, avoid population centers, compel Hanoi to abandon support for the Viet Cong insurgency in the south. The theory rested on World War II and Korean War precedents. Strategic bombing had broken industrial economies before, and it would work again. But North Vietnam was not an industrial power. Its economy ran on bicycles, sampans, and human labor. The Ho Chi Minh Trail snaked through Laos and Cambodia, a logistical artery immune to interdiction by conventional air power. Hanoi's leadership calculated that they could absorb punishment indefinitely, while American patience would erode under mounting losses and political pressure. The mismatch between U.S. doctrine and Vietnamese reality was fundamental, yet it took months of bloodshed to become undeniable. In early 1965, American strike aircraft operated as if the skies belonged to them. F-105 Thunderchiefs, single-seat fighter bombers capable of Mach 2 at altitude, carried 6,000-pound bomb loads into North Vietnamese airspace. Navy A-4 Skyhawks and F-8 Crusaders launched from carriers in the Gulf of Tonkin, hitting coastal targets with relative impunity. Pilots flew medium-altitude profiles, typically 12,000 to 18,000 feet, where anti-aircraft artillery posed minimal threat and bombing accuracy remained acceptable. The North Vietnamese Air Defense Network in early 1965 consisted mostly of light and medium AAA 37mm and 57mm guns clustered around key sites. These weapons forced attackers above 10,000 feet but lacked the reach or lethality to dominate the sky. MiG-17 interceptors appeared sporadically, flown by cautious pilots under strict ground control, more interested in disrupting strike formations than engaging in prolonged dogfights. American losses were tolerable, and mission planners assumed the trend would continue. Then the Soviet Union changed the equation. In late 1964 and early 1965, Moscow began shipping SA-2 guideline surface-to-air missile systems to North Vietnam. The SA-2 was a two-stage radar-guided weapon with a slant range exceeding 15 miles and an engagement envelope from 3,000 to 60,000 feet. Each battalion fielded 6 launchers, arranged in a star pattern around a central fire can radar, supported by early warning radars and optical tracking posts. The system was mobile, could be camouflaged in jungle or farmland, and required only a few hours to displace after firing. Soviet advisors trained Vietnamese crews in tactics honed during years of Cold War standoff. They taught disciplined radar discipline, emitting only when a target was committed to its attack run, and the art of the ambush. Lure strike packages into pre-surveyed kill zones, then illuminate and launch in rapid succession. The SA-2 was not a wonder weapon, but it was a force multiplier that transformed North Vietnam's air defense from a nuisance into a layered, lethal system. American intelligence detected the SAM deployments in April 1965. Reconnaissance flights photographed the distinctive star-shaped launcher sites near Hanoi and Haiphong. Analysts briefed strike crews on the new threat, but operational guidance remained vague. Rules of engagement prohibited attacks on SAM sites under construction unless they fired first, a restriction born of political caution, designed to avoid escalation and limit collateral damage. Pilots were told to evade missiles by diving and maneuvering, relying on speed and agility rather than suppression or avoidance. The first SAM launch against U.S. aircraft occurred on July 24, 1965. A Navy F-4 Phantom crew detected fire can radar emissions over the Red River Delta, then spotted the missile's distinctive white exhaust plume. The crew broke hard, defeated the missile, and returned to report the engagement. 3 days later, an Air Force F-4C was not so fortunate. An SA-2 detonated close enough to shred the aircraft's tail, forcing the crew to eject over hostile territory. The age of the missile trap had begun. Within weeks, North Vietnamese SAM battalions established overlapping engagement zones around Hanoi, Haiphong, and the Northeast Rail Corridor. Strike packages now faced a dilemma: fly low to avoid missiles and accept murderous AAA fire, or stay high and risk SAM intercepts. The F-105's speed advantage meant little when a missile could accelerate to Mach 3.5 and maneuver at 20 Gs. Pilots learned to watch for the telltale dust cloud at launch, the missile's initial slow climb, then its terrifying acceleration as the booster dropped away and the sustainer motor ignited. The SA-2's psychological impact exceeded its kill rate. Even a near-miss forced strike aircraft to jettison bombs and break formation, degrading accuracy and cohesion. Formations that once flew straight and level now jinked and weaved, burning fuel and limiting time over target. The North Vietnamese quickly grasped that they did not need to destroy every attacker. Disruption was enough. A single SAM battalion could render an entire target area untenable, forcing planners to divert sorties or accept unacceptable losses. By September 1965, Rolling Thunder's early optimism had evaporated. Sortie rates climbed, but target destruction lagged. The Thanh Hoa Bridge, nicknamed the Dragon's Jaw, absorbed hundreds of bombs without collapsing, its massive steel and concrete spans shrugging off conventional ordnance. Meanwhile, U.S. aircraft losses mounted. 43 aircraft downed in July, 51 in August. Roughly one-third fell to SAMs, one-third to AAA, and the remainder to MiGs, ground fire, and operational accidents. The air war had become a grinding attrition campaign, and the North Vietnamese were winning the exchange rate. Hanoi's air defense doctrine relied on integration. SAMs forced attackers low, where AAA waited. AAA forced them high into SAM envelopes. MiGs exploited the chaos, slashing through disrupted formations. The system was not seamless. Coordination gaps and equipment shortages plagued the defenders, but it was resilient and adaptive. American air power, designed for high-intensity conventional war in Europe, struggled against an enemy that blended modern technology with guerrilla cunning. The U.S. response to the SAM threat evolved through improvisation and desperation. In August 1965, the Air Force formed the first Wild Weasel teams, two-seat F-100F Super Sabres, equipped with radar warning receivers and AGM-45 Shrike anti-radiation missiles. The concept was simple and suicidal. Fly ahead of the strike package, provoke SAM radars to emit, then fire a Shrike down the beam before the missile launched. Early Weasel crews had minimal training, unreliable equipment, and life expectancies measured in weeks. The Shrike was a stopgap weapon. It homed on radar emissions with a range of roughly 10 miles, barely enough to engage a SAM site before it could launch. If the fire can radar shut down, the Shrike went ballistic and missed. If the site used decoys or dummy transmitters, the missile wasted itself on empty revetments. Weasel crews learned to identify SAM sites by terrain, camouflage patterns, and the behavior of associated radars, building a mental database of threats that no briefing chart could capture. Strike tactics shifted toward low-altitude ingress and egress. Flights approached targets at 500 feet or below, using terrain masking to avoid radar detection, then popped up for a brief bombing pass before diving back to the weeds. The tactic reduced SAM effectiveness, but increased vulnerability to small arms fire and light AAA. Pilots reported taking hits from rifle-caliber rounds, and several aircraft were lost to 37mm guns positioned along likely approach corridors. Fuel consumption at low altitude was punishing. An F-105 burning through its internal tanks in 30 minutes at sea level needed aerial refueling on every mission. Tanker tracks over Laos and the Gulf of Tonkin became choke points. A missed rendezvous meant diverting to Thailand or ditching in the ocean. The tempo of operations strained maintenance crews, who worked 16-hour shifts to keep jets flyable. Sortie rates remained high, but the cost in men, machines, and morale was unsustainable. North Vietnamese SAM crews refined their ambush techniques. They learned to position launchers in valleys or behind ridgelines, using terrain to mask radar returns until the last moment. They employed dummy sights, wooden mock-ups, and corner reflectors to draw Shrike missiles and waste reconnaissance sorties. They practiced rapid displacement, moving launchers after 1 or 2 firings to avoid retaliatory strikes. Soviet advisors introduced shoot and scoot tactics, reducing the window for suppression to mere minutes. The fire can radar's narrow beam and high pulse repetition frequency made it difficult to jam with the electronic countermeasures pods available in 1965. Early ECM systems were bulky, power-hungry, and often ineffective against modern Soviet radars. Crews reported that jamming sometimes triggered launches rather than preventing them, as SAM operators switched to optical tracking or home-on-jam modes. The electronic warfare learning curve was steep, and the North Vietnamese climbed it alongside their adversaries. Then came the MiGs. North Vietnamese pilots, initially cautious, grew bolder as they learned to exploit the chaos created by SAMs and AAA. MiG-17 seconds, subsonic and lightly armed, used hit-and-run tactics. Dive from altitude, fire a burst of 37mm cannon, then break away before the escorts could react. MiG-21 seconds, faster and equipped with infrared-guided atoll missiles, engaged from beyond visual range, forcing strike packages to jettison bombs and defend themselves. American fighter escorts, F-4 Phantoms, armed with AIM-7 Sparrow and AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles, struggled with restrictive rules of engagement. Visual identification was mandatory before firing, negating the Phantom's radar advantage and forcing crews into turning fights where the nimble MiG-17 excelled. The F-4 lacked an internal gun, relying entirely on missiles that proved unreliable in the humid, high-G environment over North Vietnam. Pilots reported Sparrow failure rates exceeding 50% and Sidewinders that refused to track or detonated prematurely. On October 7th, a 16-ship F-105 strike package targeted the Yen Bai ammunition depot 80 miles northwest of Hanoi. The mission profile called for a high-speed, low-altitude approach through a narrow valley, followed by a pop-up attack from 8,000 feet. Intelligence reported light AAA and no SAM activity in the target area. The strike leader, a veteran of over 50 missions, briefed a tight formation and a rapid egress to minimize exposure. The formation crossed into North Vietnamese airspace at 10:15 a.m., skimming ridgelines at 450 feet and 550 knots. As the lead flight climbed for the attack run, fire can radars illuminated from 3 directions. SAM launches followed within seconds, 6 missiles in the air simultaneously, converging on the formation from different azimuths. The lead pilot broke left, jettisoned his bombs, and dove for the valley floor. 2 wingmen followed, but the 4th aircraft took a proximity-fused warhead amidships and disintegrated. The remaining Thunder Chiefs scattered, abandoning the coordinated attack. Some pilots pressed individual runs, dropping ordnance through a curtain of AAA that filled the sky with black puffs and red tracers. Others egressed immediately, fuel states critical after the high-G maneuvering. A Wild Weasel F-100F fired 2 Shrikes at the nearest SAM site, but both missiles lost lock when the fire can radar shut down. The strike achieved negligible damage to the target, cost 1 aircraft and crew, and demonstrated the futility of predictable tactics against an integrated air defense. The Yanbai raid crystallized the problem Rolling Thunder faced. Hanoi's defenders had learned to read American patterns, approach corridors, attack altitudes, time over target windows. They positioned SAM batteries to exploit those patterns, creating kill zones that forced attackers into no-win choices. The U.S. response: more sorties, heavier bombs, tighter formations, played into North Vietnamese strengths. Brute force could not overcome a thinking, adaptive enemy. By late 1965, the Air Force and Navy began experimenting with chaff corridors and coordinated SEAD strikes. Chaff, bundles of aluminum strips cut to half the wavelength of Firecan radars, created false targets and degraded tracking accuracy when dispensed in dense clouds. Strike packages dropped chaff along ingress routes, creating temporary radar-free corridors. The tactic worked initially, but North Vietnamese operators learned to distinguish chaff clouds from real targets by observing Doppler shifts and correlation with optical sightings. Iron Hand missions, dedicated flights tasked with SAM suppression, escorted major strikes. Iron Hand aircraft carried a mix of cluster bombs, rockets, and Shrikes, attacking SAM sites before and during the main strike. The missions were high risk. SAM crews often held fire until Iron Hand flights passed, then engaged the follow-on bombers. Coordination between Iron Hand and strike elements was crude, relying on voice radio calls and visual signals rather than data links or automated queuing. The human cost mounted. By December 1965, Rolling Thunder had flown over 55,000 sorties and lost 126 aircraft. Aircrew losses, killed, captured, or missing, exceeded 200. The North Vietnamese shot down jets faster than factories could replace them, and experienced crews faster than training pipelines could produce them. Morale in strike squadrons frayed as pilots flew mission after mission into the same defended targets, watching friends disappear in fireballs or parachute into captivity. Hanoi's air defenses, meanwhile, grew stronger. Soviet shipments delivered additional SA-2 battalions, raising the total to over 30 sites by year's end. AAA batteries proliferated, with 85mm and 100mm guns covering approaches to key targets. The North Vietnamese integrated early warning radars, ground observers, and radio intercept teams into a surveillance network that tracked American formations from takeoff to landing. The defenders knew when strikes were coming, where they were headed, and how many aircraft to expect. In early 1966, Washington authorized strikes against petroleum storage facilities near Hanoi and Haiphong. The raids were intended to cripple North Vietnam's fuel supply and demonstrate American resolve. Planners assembled the largest strike packages of the war, over 60 aircraft per mission, including bombers, escorts, Iron Hand flights, and tankers. The attacks achieved tactical surprise and inflicted significant damage, destroying an estimated 70% of North Vietnam's above-ground fuel reserves. But the strategic impact was negligible. North Vietnam's economy consumed minimal petroleum. Most supplies moved by bicycle, ox cart, and foot. Within weeks, fuel stocks were replenished by Soviet and Chinese shipments, dispersed into small caches hidden in villages and jungle clearings. The raids cost 6 aircraft and demonstrated that even successful strikes could not sever Hanoi's will or capacity to fight. Air power alone, no matter how precisely applied, could not win a war against an enemy whose strength lay in endurance rather than industry. The SA-2 threat forced doctrinal innovation. The Air Force accelerated development of the F-4C Wild Weasel, a Phantom variant equipped with improved radar warning receivers, electronic countermeasures, and the AGM-78 Standard Arm, a longer-range anti-radiation missile with a memory capable of homing on radars even after they shut down. Weasel crews developed hunter-killer tactics, pairing with F-4 strike aircraft to saturate SAM defenses, while bombers attacked the primary target. Navy squadrons pioneered the Iron Hand concept, using 4 Skyhawks and 6 Intruders in coordinated Sayed strikes. The A-6, an all-weather attack jet with terrain-following radar and a sophisticated navigation system, could penetrate defended airspace at night and in monsoon weather, hitting SAM sites when they were least prepared. The combination of day and night pressure, electronic warfare, and anti-radiation missiles gradually eroded the SA-2's invincibility, though it remained a deadly threat throughout the war. North Vietnamese air defense tactics evolved in response. SAM crews adopted shoot-and-scoot discipline, firing 1 or 2 missiles, then displacing before Iron Hand flights could respond. They used decoy radars and false launch signatures to draw Shrikes and Standard Arms away from real sites. They coordinated with AAA batteries to create engagement zones, where aircraft evading missiles flew directly into gun envelopes. The cat-and-mouse game between attackers and defenders became a contest of adaptation, with neither side achieving lasting dominance. MiG tactics shifted toward ambush and disengagement. Pilots loitered at low altitude, hidden from American radar by ground clutter, then climbed rapidly to intercept strike packages as they egressed. The tactic exploited the F-4's poor rearward visibility and the tendency of strike pilots, low on fuel and eager to escape, to relax vigilance after leaving the target area. Several Phantoms fell to MiG 21 seconds, firing ATOL missiles from astern. Kills attributed to disciplined ground control and patient execution. By mid-1966, Rolling Thunder had settled into a grinding routine. Strikes hit the same targets repeatedly: bridges, rail yards, supply depots, only to see them repaired within days. The North Vietnamese developed rapid repair techniques: prefabricated bridge spans, portable rail sections, camouflaged bypass routes. They moved supplies at night, dispersed storage sites, and accepted losses as the price of resistance. American air power inflicted pain, but could not impose decisive costs. The air campaign's failure stemmed from mismatched objectives and means. Rolling Thunder aimed to coerce Hanoi into negotiations by demonstrating the futility of continued resistance. But North Vietnam's leadership valued unification and independence above economic development or casualties. They calculated that time favored them. American public opinion would sour, political constraints would tighten, and eventually Washington would tire of the war. The calculation proved correct. The SA-2's introduction forced the U.S. to confront the limits of technological superiority. American jets were faster, more heavily armed, and supported by vastly superior logistics. But speed and firepower meant little against an enemy that refused to concentrate forces or defend fixed positions. The North Vietnamese turned their weakness, lack of industrial infrastructure, into strength, creating a target set too dispersed and resilient for air power to destroy. The missile threat also revealed gaps in American doctrine. Suppression of enemy air defenses was an afterthought in 1965, a mission without dedicated aircraft, weapons, or tactics. The Wild Weasel program emerged from necessity, cobbled together by crews who invented procedures in combat. The lessons learned over North Vietnam, integrated SEAD, electronic warfare, adaptive tactics, became foundational for future conflicts, but the learning curve was paid for in blood. Rolling Thunder officially ended in November 1968, after 3.5 years and over 300,000 sorties. The campaign destroyed bridges, factories, and fuel depots, but it did not break North Vietnam's will or capacity to wage war. The Ho Chi Minh Trail remained open, supplies continued to flow south, and the insurgency in South Vietnam intensified. American aircraft losses exceeded 900, with over 700 aircrew killed or captured. The SA-2 accounted for roughly 150 shootdowns, a fraction of total losses, but a disproportionate impact on tactics and morale. The missile transformed North Vietnamese airspace from a permissive environment into a deadly gauntlet, forcing attackers to accept higher risks and lower effectiveness. The psychological burden, knowing that an invisible radar could cue a missile at any moment, wore down crews and degraded mission performance in ways that statistics could not capture. The lessons of Rolling Thunder echoed through subsequent decades. The importance of SAAD, the value of precision-guided munitions, the necessity of realistic rules of engagement, all became doctrinal pillars. But the fundamental insight remained elusive. Air power, no matter how advanced, cannot substitute for political strategy or compel an enemy whose will exceeds his vulnerability. North Vietnam's air defenses did not win the war, but they ensured that American air power could not win it either. The SA-2 guideline, a Soviet weapon operated by Vietnamese crews, changed the calculus of air warfare. It proved that a determined defender with modest technology could impose unacceptable costs on a vastly superior attacker. The white telephone poles that rose from the jungle in 1965 became symbols of a larger truth. In war, adaptation and resolve often matter more than firepower and speed. Stories like this remind us that war isn't just about dates and numbers. It's about people, the split-second decisions that shaped entire battles. Every flight, every firefight, every tactic is a piece of a massive puzzle where one order could decide the fate of hundreds. We bring back these forgotten moments to show that behind every report and archive page stood real men, pilots, scouts, engineers, soldiers, whose courage and ingenuity changed the course of war, even if their names were never written in textbooks. Tell us in the comments, what moment of the Vietnam War impressed you the most? Or what operation should we cover next? Your ideas keep these stories alive. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. It helps us uncover more forgotten chapters where history lives through those who fought it.